podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Well, welcome to another episode of Factor the Future. I'm here with Alexandria as always. And today's episode, we are going to be uncovering, like we have in the past, is uncovering the past of manufacturing all the way up to 2050. And we are at 2020 this year. So current events. And what we wanted to discuss today is like, what are some of the things that we've seen has been some of the disruptors in the manufacturing community. And Alexandria is going to kind of walk us through some of the things that have been going on that maybe we were there, but we maybe just don't remember it. But it's important to realize that, you know, there's a lot that has gone on in the manufacturing community over the last couple of years, and particularly we're going to be talking about probably the U.S. market, but it impacts the global market. So, Alexander, what are some of the things that you've seen that's just kind of just on the top of your mind that we should be talking about?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this and I think this is a fun one because we're halfway through the decade, just a little bit more. And so this is our first decade where we can talk about what's fresh in our minds, or maybe we kind of forgot about already since short-term memory loss or whatever, but also start making some predictions for what we expect to see throughout the second half of this decade. So I'm excited about that. Kicking off the 2020s was obviously COVID. COVID had immense effect on the manufacturing in the US specifically, as well as around the world. Not only did factories shut down, which really kind of opened up this whole supply chain can of worms, but then we had all these other downstream issues with the supply chain that really kind of kicked off this whole reshoring exercise and acceleration of reshoring. So for those of you who don't know, we've had a couple of guests on who have talked a little bit about reshoring. Rosemary, one of them, in very early episodes, one of our first guests. But what we learned in our research, as well as in the discussions with her, is that roughly 360,000 jobs are reshored in about and around the early 2020s. So that really peaked in 2022. And that was a 53% increase compared to the prior years. So really massive reshoring efforts after this exposed supply chain risks that were illuminated by COVID. So that was really the story of the first 3 years of the 2020s. There were a few other things going on where, you know, there were efforts to combat inflation. Everybody was dealing with that. There's different construction investments and things like that. And then also there was the $52 billion investment in chip manufacturing. So kind of all these things converging, the outlook, while it started probably less than ideal in various pillars of manufacturing, the workforce and factory shutdown and supply chain issues, kind of prepared for hopefully a period of prosperity, right? So then because we've had these problems and these issues illuminated, we've started to correct that in the US specifically by reshoring, making more things here, so we're less dependent on the global supply chain and geopolitical, what's the word I'm looking for? Volatility.
Okay.
So AW, what are you thinking about when you see the reshoring happening? What are you thinking about with even some of the technology that's really come into play post-COVID? I mean, that's where AI comes into the mix, you know? So what are your thoughts just on what you experienced even in COVID yourself, with the workshops you put on and all the other things?
I was going to ask you this same question because I don't know if we've ever talked about it, but like, what was I'll share my experience when I was
Yeah.
affected by COVID, and I think everyone's got a story. That's the thing about it. Like, I mean, I was in consulting, and they had to let me go. And since then, I have my own practice now. However, I mean, I get the chance to go to other manufacturing plants and see, and it was kind of the back end of the COVID thing, but it was just amazing, like how innovative individuals got in. And I'm always asking that question, is like, how did you produce during the COVID times? And it was like, I was in some facilities. I mean, like we were like draped in like uniform stuff, masks,
Hazmat, basically. Yeah.
It's just like you couldn't tell who was who, and nor could you hear them either because your earplugs in. And that was kind of my thing. But I was going to ask, like, I don't think I've ever asked you, like, what was COVID like for you? We're talking about 6 years ago.
So I have a few different angles I'd like to take, and I'll preface with they're in direct conflict with each other. So like there's sort of a dichotomy of experiences I had throughout COVID from a personal and professional standpoint. So having ADHD, I've never really talked about this with you or anybody in the audience. I've never brought this up. It's completely undiagnosed, but couldn't be more obvious if you just talk to me for a little while, or you kind of get a peek behind the curtain. Anyway, I didn't realize how exhausting and mentally fatigued and emotionally fatigued I was from working in an office, because there was never a work from home option available, right? Like, so when we did start working from home, my whole experience with work completely changed for the better. I was so much more productive. I had no problem starting earlier, working later. In those days, I was in role shifts. So part of the COVID experience for me was kind of being plucked out of my comfort zone and placed in a completely different realm of the manufacturing space. And that's when I got to do a lot of stuff with procurement and really level up a lot of different skills that I didn't have prior to that time. So for me, it was a period of strong growth. It was a real expansion in my experience and understanding of manufacturing, but business. It was great for my exposure to the organization because I was working with all of the C-suite, E-suite people running the program. So in those ways, it was really great for me. And learning to work from home and having that experience of working from home was just incredible. So that was life-changing in the best way possible. Personally, I lost 2 uncles, so that was really hard for me. But that also led me to have a very different experience with sort of what I would consider some people's attitudes at my organization about this nonchalant, laissez-faire, like, oh, COVID's no big deal type thing. So like having lost 2 uncles in a 2-year period of time to COVID, kind of gave me a different perspective on that. And therefore, like when, return to office and all this stuff was getting kind of like pushed aggressively, I would say, like, or we weren't really, in my opinion, taking things as seriously as we could have. I thought we were exposing ourselves to unnecessary risk when it seemed completely unreasonable. So I had a very contrarian view, like where some people I work with are like, oh, it's just like getting the flu. I'm like, it's really not like getting the flu, because I had people literally die from that. Multiple people in my family die from that. My sister worked in the ICU, so I also kind of got that experience, and that really affected her. But at the same time, it was also like one of the best times of my life, because my boyfriend and I were spending like constant time together. We had pretty much complete freedom to live and be and move, and we didn't really like.
Just a quick break, and then we'll get right back to the show. We are always open for meaningful sponsorship or guests that align with our audience. If your brand fits and would like to be on one of the top 10% podcasters in the world. Let's chat. Reach out by email in the show notes. Back to the show.
Treat it, I guess, as a thing that we prevented us from living our lives. Like we went camping, we were safe about stuff, but we also still traveled, I guess. So like that was kind of my experience with COVID. A lot of positives in a lot of different ways, but then at the same time, like significant loss with family. So like, balancing all of that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, everyone's got the story, and it's so interesting. I do like hearing those, how I persevered into it, but particularly in the I'm going to bring us back home to the manufacturing community. Is like, they still worked. They still worked.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting when I remember my first time during the downturn of COVID. I was in a fish processing plant in New Hampshire, and they're coming in and they're testing my temperature, and like I said, we put so much stuff on we couldn't even recognize each other. But yeah, that it's the 2020s, and what else do you have that maybe we just aren't remembering that are going into it, and what's going on to its future? Because I'll be honest, you and I, we talk a lot about AI, and sometimes we get tired of talking about it, but we use it constantly, and it is. I can't talk about it. It's such a game changer, and particularly we're going to have a guest on in a couple months, AI expert, and he's not going to be talking about Gen AI, but he's just going to be talking about how AI is transforming the manufacturing community. So what else have we seen over the last couple of years?
If we're talking about defining moments and defining factors of the 2020s, I think the first and obvious one is COVID, which we've covered, and the downstream, arguably overall net positive effects of that, where American manufacturing and Americans realized we needed to bring some of this back, that we were too dependent and reliant on other countries' manufacturing, and it wasn't sufficient, and it wasn't putting ourselves in a low risk situation from a manufacturing or frankly just general standpoint. But the second defining, I would say, experience of the 2020s, at least up till now, has been really the AI breakthroughs. So this started, coming out of the COVID era when things kind of stabilized there. You broke into the generative AI situation, which is just basically a back and forth conversation. You're prompting AI is returning something to you, generally based on a mathematical equation, which my friend thankfully sent me. He sent me an Instagram reel today explaining he has very interesting take on AI, despite he builds all these data centers for AI. So different story, fun story. But he explained that the reel explained how AI works, where it's all basically math problems, and that's how AI returns the responses to you. But in the recent year, so 2025 to present, that's when agentic AI is coming on the scene. So instead of just the prompting and, the volleying back and forth, AI has evolved so quickly in the last 3 years where now it can start doing the planning. And I think 25% of manufacturers are planning adoption within the next few years. So not only have we, been defined by COVID, took a real look at our supply chain, landed with AI coming on the map and making it basically into everybody's hands and homes, but opening up to large manufacturing companies. And now what we're seeing is what was once only accessible for your Fortune 500 manufacturing companies to be using this leading, technology. Now our mid-sized manufacturers are getting on the scene. And, I'm going to be quick to reference when Raynon was on the podcast and talked about their very, I would say, expedient way of assessing mid-sized current, manufacturing companies, which by the way, there's about 240, just shy of 240,000 manufacturing companies in the US as of today or recent years. So there's a huge market for this. There's huge need for this because the labor market, there's still a gap in the labor market, right? One of the things that we're seeing in this particular decade is that most manufacturing companies have a 5% or more vacancy rate for the roles that they're trying to fill. And the good news is, robotics are becoming much more advanced. Agentic AI and agentic AI is positioning those gaps to be filled. But on the other hand, the potentially negative consequence of that is we could be looking at higher unemployment rates, some predicting even as much as 6.8% unemployment or 6.5% unemployment by 2028. So what does that really do with current deficits and budget, and how do we make sure those people are okay, and all of these other things? So I think that's where we currently sit. Those are the questions we have for the future and for the remainder of the 2020s. And I think a lot of that will be unfolding a lot faster than I think we can be really prepared for. And I think most people are prepared for it. It's unfortunate, but it's detrimental.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
There's I don't know the unknown, but there's going to be a change. And that's particularly with some of my research is, if it can be automated, it's going to be automated, and robotics are going to be into it, and is the automation of it, where people are removed from it and become more efficient on it. What is not known is, how do we embrace it, understand it, can we maintain it, maintenance into it? That's where my thought is going into it, and there's a different seat that we're going to be getting into than what we've seen in the past. Any other thoughts on the 2020s?
I guess my only firstly call to action to people is a lot in the conversations I have day to day with people across varying careers and professions. I think there's just a complete misunderstanding of how powerful and how disruptive AI will be for common people, or even very advanced people. I'll give you three examples. So one example I'm thinking of, and the people that aren't really probably the least prepared people, I'll start with them, which are the people who make their living cleaning houses, make their living in doing basic service jobs. Because if by the end of this year, any human can buy a robot for $20,000 to $30,000 with, say, a 5 to 10 year life expectancy of that robot to do all of the tasks around their house, how many just simply regular everyday house cleaners are going to be out of jobs? Okay. And you think about who employs house cleaners, like people who get their houses cleaned, probably the people who can afford to spend 20 or 30 grand on a robot to do that without having to have a human involved. So I think that group of people are at risk. I think it doesn't just extend to the at-home consumer level cleaning. All the offices are getting cleaned. Bars are getting cleaned at night. All of this stuff. So those would be my number one concerns for those people. The second situation is I'm in the middle. I've talked a little bit about the software that I'm developing for the fleet industry. And I had agreements drafted. I used Claude to do this. I contacted one of my very good friends who's a great business attorney, and he read through all the contracts that Claude drafted. And he said, if you did this on your own or used AI, the legal profession is in serious trouble in the future, because he had zero feedback, zero changes to make from the agreements that Claude had made I mean, 7 to 10 agreements that I had to have Claude draft. They did it in Claude did it in 5 minutes, and the real life human attorney had no constructive feedback where it's like, oh, AI missed this. So lesson to not only the kind of physical manual labor people, but also the white collar folks. And I think the differentiator and the gap, just like Raynon talked about from a more macro scale in the manufacturing space, down to the micro, which is the human, individual human, the people who leverage AI, partner with AI, learn how to use it to do their jobs and increase their output while reducing their inputs are going to be the ones who are positioned very well over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. The people who are naysayers and just lack of interest, lack of exposure are going to struggle. They're probably going to be worked out of a job by the other team. So I think that's what people really need to look out for. But that's kind of all I have to say, I guess, about the 2020s.
Okay. We might have to revisit more of 2020s. But
yeah,
we got to bring this to a close. And
yep.
Another factory of the future. All right.
Yep. We're out of here like finished goods.
We are. This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.